sponsored by the Institute of Museum and Library Services.
Good afternoon and welcome to the 2021 Library of Congress National Book Festival. My name is Naomi Kokion and I'm the Chief of Informal Learning at the library. Today I'm interviewing Traci Chee, author of We Are Not Free. To our online audience, thank you for joining. We'll take your questions during this interview. Please go ahead and put them in the chat feature or the Q&A feature now. We have about 30 minutes to answer your questions. But to begin, Traci, thank you for being here. And to get us started, I hope we could talk about the title of your book. You spoke about this beautifully in the video on demand that we have here on the festival website, but in case anyone didn't get a chance to see it, I'd love for you to share with us the inspiration for the title of the book, which I think will also help us better understand your inspiration for the book as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Naomi, and thank you to the National Book Festival for having me here. We Are Not Free is the collective account of a group of Japanese American teenagers in World War II as they are going through the Japanese American incarceration of the 1940s. And that title, We Are Not Free, is inspired actually by an interview that I did with my Auntie Mary while I was researching for this book. It was the summer of 2016, and my mom and I went on this kind of road trip to talk to all of our Nisei relatives who had been in the camps because I was wanting to do the research for this book. And so one afternoon, my mom and I sat down with Auntie Mary and at Auntie Mary's kitchen table, and she gave us like lemonade with fresh squeezed lemons from her garden, and she told us, about her life and these stories and what it was like before the camps and in the camps and after the camps. And we stayed the night that night, and the next morning when I woke up, she was sitting in the kitchen. She was a very early riser, and so she started telling me, like, I have been thinking all night about what I want to say to you, like about what I want you to remember about the thing that kind of struck me most about the Japanese American incarceration in my experience. And she told me how in 1941, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, she was a junior in high school. She was in the civics class. And in this class, her teacher told her and her fellow students, like, again and again, oh, you're so lucky. You get to be American. You have all these great rights. So how fortunate for you. And then a few months later in 1942, Auntie Mary and her family, including my grandma, Auntie Mary's younger sister, were evicted from their apartment in San Francisco and shipped to a detention center 15 miles south called Tanforan, the former racetrack. And they were forced to live, the family of 8 were forced to live in a horse stable. One stall for this whole family were crammed into there. They didn't have plumbing in there. They had one light bulb suspended from the ceiling. And Auntie Mary told me how kind of later that year, when more incarcerees were being shipped to this more permanent camp in Topaz, Utah, she was feeling lonelier and lonelier. And so during the day, she would climb the grandstand of this old racetrack, and she would stand there at the top and look out, not over the detention center. She would look out over the free city of San Bruno. And she would see all of these people driving their cars, going to school, doing the grocery shopping. And she told me she would sit there and cry, thinking to herself again and again, I am not free. And this story made it into the book, actually. In chapter 3, one of the characters, Yum Yum, has kind of this same experience of being told, you are free, you are American, you are entitled to these civil rights, and then seeing all of those rights stripped away from you. And having that dissonance of being told, this is your country, you belong here, and then kind of seeing and experiencing firsthand that it isn't. So that's kind of the origin of the title.
Yeah, it's such a moving story, and your experiences researching and learning about your family history are really powerful. And we actually have a question from the online audience that speaks a little bit to this. Sienna says, congratulations on the well-deserved awards for We Are Not Free. How does it feel to be recognized for a book loosely based on your family history?
Oh my gosh, Sienna, thank you so much for this question. Yeah, We Are Not Free has garnered some award attention. It was a National Book Award finalist. It was a Prince Honor winner and a Walter Award book. And every time any kind of acclaim has come towards this book or at this book, kind of my family is the first people I call, because it means so much to me, right? This isn't just my story. Yeah, I wrote it, but these are my family stories. This is my family history. And so any good things that happen for this book, I want to share with them, because I feel like it means that people are recognizing these stories. People are hearing what happened to you. People are not wanting to forget. They're acknowledging this. And that means, I know, so much to me. And I think it means so much to my surviving Nisei family as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, sort of following up on that, I mean, what has their response been to the book? How have they reacted to the book or to the, yeah, I'm sure they're very proud of you, but do they have any responses to the story?
Yeah. I've been very fortunate from kind of the beginning, as my mom and I were on that interview research trip, to have the support of my family. They were all willing to sit down with me and be recorded as I asked them these questions. And they were so generous with their time and kind of with their energy as they told me these very difficult stories, and also some funny ones, you know. And so they all knew that I was doing this research so that I could write a book. And once we sold the book to HMH, now Clarion, I told them, they were, again, some of the first people I told, and I was like, family, I get to do this thing. I get to turn your stories into a book. And so once it was ready for them to see, once it was kind of revised to the point that it was, I don't know, readable by anyone other than me and my editor, I sent them copies and I said, family, this is the book. This is what I've done. I hope that you like it. But if there's anything that you're not comfortable with, if there's anything that you see in here that you don't want told, please let me know so that I can edit it out before publication. And unfailingly, they all came back with, no, this is great. Thank you so much for telling our stories. We're so proud of you. And so as we have gone kind of past publication and into award season, and now I get to be here with you, I think they are very proud of me. And it just makes me think of how lucky I am to have had this experience. Like, if I hadn't gone to interview these family members, and if I hadn't, not been forced, but hadn't been kind of obligated to keep them updated on what's going on with this book and kind of their experiences, I wouldn't have had as close a relationship as I do to them now. And so I feel like writing this book has brought me closer to them, and it has given me kind of a little bit of insight into what it was like in their lives when they were young. And that is such a gift, right? Writing this has been a huge responsibility, because I feel this weight to tell it as authentically as I can, but also, what a gift. I'm so lucky.
Oh, that's really wonderful. And we have more great questions coming in. Yolanda asks, the cover of We Are Not Free is so striking. How important is cover art to you, especially as a writer for young people? Do you give input?
Thank you. I think it's Yolanda. Thank you for this question. Yeah, thank you. So the cover art for any book, to me, feels like kind of not totally my domain, right? Like, my domain is the words, and those I feel like I have the expertise and kind of the background to be able to make big changes. But the thing that's important to me for a cover is that I would like the cover to have the feel of the book, so that when people look at it, they know, oh, okay, it's gonna have a certain tone, or it's gonna feel a certain way. So when we were here's the book right here, We Are Not Free, when we were doing this kind of cover design, I was lucky to work with a great designer, a great illustrator, a great photoshopping team on this. It was really important to me to have more than one character on it because it is a novel in stories. Pretty much each chapter is from a different character. And so to get that ensemble feel, it was really important. And then I think it was the designer that had this idea to have them kind of look like graffiti. So that these characters are kind of sketched onto the wall behind them, and what is actually there are these piles of luggage kind of piled up on the street during the mass eviction. And so hopefully that gives the feeling of like, this is historical, right? This is a fading, this is past, right? But also because of the graffiti element, I hope it feels kind of young and kind of, let's say, urgent and immediate. And so that's kind of the look that we were going for. And I'm so excited with how it turned out.
Oh, that's quite interesting, especially, as a work of historical fiction, we could have gone a more, historical photograph route. But along the lines of questions about characters and character development, Emily asks, how did you decide to star such a large cast of characters? And what was it like to develop distinct narrative voices for each one?
Oh, thank you, Emily, for this two-part question. I'd say I did not set out to write a novel in stories with 14 main characters. I actually, as I started to do the research for this, I thought I was going to have, one main character, one story, more traditional in structure. The thing was that as I was interviewing my family members, actually, their stories were so interesting and their stories were also so different. Right. For example, my biological grandparents, they were like most of the characters in We Are Not Free. They were inner city kids. They were growing up in the middle of San Francisco, and they were working class. My great grandfathers were a gardener and a clerk, respectively. They were renting their apartments, and their experience of the incarceration was quite a bit different from, let's say, my step grandmother, who was from a family of farmers in the Sacramento Valley. And so they owned their property and they worked that land. And so losing that land for a fifth of what it was worth during the mass eviction was very different from my grandparents in San Francisco, kind of, losing their apartments. Or my step grandfather was from a very, very poor family of itinerant farmers in LA. And sometimes they didn't have enough to eat. And so their experience of going into the temporary detention centers and getting 3 meals a day was, again, very, very different. And as I did these interviews and read novels and newspapers and nonfiction about the time, I was like, I can't do it. I can't put all of these stories into just, one character's perspective. I have no idea how I'm going to do that. And then I was like, well, maybe I don't have to. Maybe I can tell some of these different experiences by having a wider cast of characters to tell the story of a group of friends instead of just one character. And so once I realized that I could write a novel in stories where one chapter is kind of like a self-contained thing all on its own, that kind of opened up this whole world for me of what I could do with the novel. And there was a challenge, yes, Emily, as you mentioned, of trying to make these characters feel distinct. And I did that in like a couple of ways. First, I would say I tried to structure each chapter a little bit differently. You can see this kind of in Yum Yum's chapter. She's chapter 3. She's our window into the Tanforan Temporary Detention Center. And at this point in the incarceration, they don't know really how long they're going to be there. Their future is really, really uncertain. They've been kind of locked up behind barbed wire fences. There are guard towers. This is the first time. And so she's feeling imprisoned by this. And so her chapter is structured by a tallying of the days: day 1, day 2, day 13, day 29, right? And it's kind of tallying these because she just feels like she's in prison. And so that is different, for example, than, let's say, Moss's chapter. He is our window into the basic training for the 442nd Regimental Combat Unit in Camp Shelby, Mississippi. And his chapter is structured as a series of letters to his father. His father has passed away by this point, but that presence in Moss's life is so kind of influential that he kind of writes these half journal entries, half letters to his father saying, Dad, I know you would have wanted this for me, but Dad, I'm having a hard time here. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm trying to do what you would have wanted for me. I'm trying to live up to your dreams, but I just don't know if I can do it. And so that chapter is structured that way. Or later on, there's a chapter in verse by a character who I think of as his voice is a song, and so it came out that way. And then the other way I tried to have this structured was by thinking about how each character lives in their body. And I think that shows up very clearly in Frankie's chapter. Frankie is this very combative young man. He's our window into this call for volunteers for the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. And Frankie is pissed about it. He's kind of pissed about everything, but this really kind of sets him over the edge. And he is a boy, I think, who lives in his fists, right? He's always out there looking for a fight. And that's kind of how I tried to think about him and write him. In contrast, I think the first chapter we get, Minnow is a boy who kind of lives in his head and his fingers. He's a very not standoffish, but he's kind of a wallflower. He's more observant. He's not quite one of the group. He's the youngest of these guys. And so the way that he interacts with the world is to kind of look and to think about things and then to draw them. So they come out in his art. And that's kind of his main way of interacting with the world. And so trying to think about how each character lives in their body, and then how they would kind of structure their time during the incarceration was definitely, those are two ways that I tried to make each chapter feel distinct.
And you've talked, so part of your desire to tell these 14 people's stories is that the experiences were complex, but Laura has a question sort of along similar lines about, she asks, did you feel pressure to make sure your book captured the experience in detail? And she says she asked that because since the internment of Japanese Americans isn't widely taught in schools, but did you feel that you needed to give the texture of the detail of the experiences because it's not widely enough known or taught?
Yeah, Laura, thank you for this question. Yeah, I absolutely felt pressure to get the feel of this right, to cleave as close to the truth as possible. On the one hand, yes, because it isn't a history that everyone knows about. And so this could be some people's first introduction to the Japanese American incarceration. Mm-hmm. But then also kind of that personal connection, right? I know people who lived this. I love people who lived this. And so to me, it felt like to be as respectful of their experiences as I could, I should be as close to the truth of their experiences as I could. And so I tried not to change dates. I tried not to change events. Here and there, I do bend the timeline a little bit, but I tried to kind of get as authentic as possible to the feelings and the events as what happened during that time, because people really lived it. And I don't think anything I could really make up would be better as a story than what happened to them, or as more moving or more powerful or truthful. And so I did, yes, try to stick very close, and I felt that pressure, especially because I am a fantasy writer and used to making things up. And so there would be times when I would just kind of go digging through the camp newspaper to try and find one detail of like, what was the camp dance called in October of 1943? Why was it canceled? That kind of thing. So yeah, I tried to be very, very faithful to the history.
Well, so this gets actually to a question we were talking about before we went on air, which was about the decision to make this a work of historical fiction. Given the wealth of material that you had about your family, did you ever think about writing a narrative nonfiction or creative nonfiction account of your family's experiences? And if so, why did you decide not to? Or tell about that process for you.
Yeah, thank you. The short answer is that I was trained to write fiction. Fiction is kind of always what I've been drawn to, and I am even more terrified of the pressure of writing creative nonfiction or narrative nonfiction.
Yeah.
And so that thought actually did not even enter into my mind because I'm not a historian by trade. And so I didn't know that I could do justice to the story if I was writing it as just nonfiction. On the other hand, though, I am also a fantasy writer by trade. And so there was a point before I started kind of interviewing my relatives where I was like, I want to write a story about the Japanese American incarceration. And you know what, I'm going to add magic to it. So there's going to be like this magical dog that can like pass in and out of the afterlife. And that dog will like follow them to the camps and it'll be so cool. And then like I started interviewing relatives and reading more material about the time. And I was like, cannot do that, right? Like for me, I couldn't have done justice to the story by adding magic into it. I think writing it as historical fiction, as a novel and stories was kind of the best that I, as a writer, could do. And so that's what I settled on. I quickly abandoned my magical dog story.
That also sounds fascinating, but I understand, the importance of sharing the story as your family lived it. Speaking of your research and delving into your family stories, Blanca asks, did you conduct any research outside your family? If so, what did that research journey look like?
Oh, Blanca, thank you for this question. Yes, so I started kind of with these interviews, but then I also read historical fiction by authors who had been incarcerated. I think of Farewell to Manzanar is one. Journey to Topaz is another. They Call Us Enemy by George Takei came out fairly recently. It was not out in time for me to read it as research, but that one is a graphic novel and I highly recommend checking it out. So I was reading historical fiction. I was also reading newspapers from the time. So newspapers from outside of camp, as well as the camp newspaper itself at Topaz, the Topaz Times. And that is archived online. And so I combed through so many of those newspapers, reading the articles and kind of reading between the lines about what camp was like at the time. I looked at photographs. The Library of Congress has a great resource of photographs that you can check out. I read nonfiction from the time, right? There's this book called The Art of Gaman that has photographs of kind of these little arts and crafts pieces that people did while they were in camps. Citizen 13660 by Mineo Kubo is a collection of her sketches from her time at the temporary detention center and the incarceration camp. So I did that research. And then I also went to go visit places like the Japanese American National Museum, which is in LA. I went to the Manzanar National Historic Site, which is in California. That's actually on the site of one of the incarceration camps. And they have, the National Parks System has this really incredible museum there that you can go walk through and check out and interact with. They have these old barracks that you can walk into and see kind of, oh, this is what, their living situation would have been like. Oh, look at, this is where they hang up their coats or put their toothbrushes. It's really incredible. And then also to kind of stand in a place where so many people were imprisoned for so long and to kind of feel the weight of that heat in this high desert location. Incredible. I also went to Topaz where my family was incarcerated. And so I got to see kind of the old cement foundations for where their barracks used to be. I got to look at the horizons that they looked at for these days of their lives. I went to the Tule Lake Segregation Center in Northern California. There's not much left of that one compared to some of these other sites, but they do have this concrete jail that was built in 1945 and at times was jam-packed with people very inhumanely. And so my family and I got to walk into that jail and see this old graffiti written in Japanese and English of people writing on the walls from that time. So those experiences, I think, really forms the way that I wrote about the camps, in addition to all of this other reading that I was doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that. And clearly a real breadth of resources you were drawing on. And I hope others who are interested in this story will look to those resources as well, into the library too. We're getting close to the end of time. We have 2 more questions here, so that's just about right. So Jasmine asks, what inspired you to write for young audiences in particular?
Jasmine, thank you for this question. I was actually trained to write for adults. I went to college to get my degree in creative writing, and then also I went to graduate school to get my degree in creative writing. And it was all like very adult, very literary kind of work that we were studying and trying to write. And then when I was in graduate school, one of my colleagues in workshop, she was like, your voice is so energetic and vibrant and youthful. Why aren't you writing for children? And I thought, yeah, why aren't I writing for children? Come to think of it, right? Most of my favorite books are books for young people. And so that kind of moment stuck with me. So when I decided, you know what, I'm going to give this author job a real shot, I decided to give it a shot, writing for young people. And so that's why, there we go, my first novel, The Reader, came out ages 12 and up, and it features a protagonist who kind of looks like me in a fantasy adventure story. And so, yeah, I feel like I love it. There's such an exciting feeling to being a young person, whether you're in middle school or high school, where it feels like you are just kind of discovering who you are and what you believe, and you're kind of getting out there and trying to figure out, who am I going to be in this world? What do I want out of my life, right? How do I want to interact with people? What change can I make? And I think that is so exciting, right? It's an exciting time to be alive, and it's a really exciting time to write about.
Well, last question here, I think is a good one for the Library of Congress to ask you. How have libraries been important throughout your writing career? And I think, your life too.
Yeah.
This is from Sienna. I'm sorry, I forgot to say.
Oh, Sienna again. Thank you. Yeah. So I think my relationship to library started when I was just a little kid, and my dad would walk us to the neighborhood library, and we would get to comb through all the books and pick ones that we could check out, and then we return them. And so I have this really lovely warm feeling of kind of discovery from when I was a kid with libraries. With respect to how it impacted my writing career, I will say that I was at UC Santa Cruz, and I was doing kind of my senior thesis, which in the creative writing department meant to write and bind a manuscript. And so our instructor brought us to the McHenry Library at UC Santa Cruz, the humanities library, and he brought us to the special collections department, where the special collections department had done this incredible thing where they had taken out all of their art books, all of these books that you would look at and you wouldn't think, oh, that looks like a book. It has a front cover, a back cover, and pages on the inside. No, some of these books were they were made out of a high-heeled shoe, and you could open the high-heeled shoe and there'd be pages in it. Or they'd look like some blinds that you would have on a window, except that they had text on them. Or there was this one that had no text on it whatsoever, and it was made out of kind of metal and circuitry. And kind of having this experience, seeing this in a library, made me think, boy, anything could be a book. Anything could be a book if only you know how to read it. And that really influenced, especially kind of my first novel, The Reader, which is as much about the magic of literacy as it is about, pirates. And so that kind of was hugely formative. I like to think a lot about what a book can do with its form, right? What kind of stories you can tell besides kind of, once upon a time to the end. How else could you kind of shake that up within the confines of a book? And so, boy, I love libraries, and yes, they have hugely influenced who I became as a writer.
Well, that's a fascinating response, and a nice place to end. Although we got one more question that's quite specific, so hopefully we have time to just answer that one in our last minute. Robert asks, do you ever have young adults or children read drafts of your books, like a focus group, then revise your work based on their suggestions before publication?
Robert, thank you for this. I don't. Most of kind of my peer group are adults writing for children, but I do try to consult kids if I'm writing something realistic and set during modern day. So I'm working on a short story that features some stuff about anime. And I was like, I don't know what the youths like in anime. I know what I like in anime. And so I was texting with some of my friends' kids to say, like, what are you watching? What do you like about it? Tell me about all your interests in anime.
That seems reasonable, and those are lucky kids who get to weigh in and help you out on your books. So thank you, Traci Chee, so much for this conversation and your recorded interview, which I hope you all will watch as well. Again, you've been listening to Traci Chee talk about her book, We Are Not Free. Thank you to the online audience. We hope you enjoy the rest of the festival.
Thank you.